The lost years of Jesus. Where was he before age 30? The Bible gives us the highlight reel of Jesus' life, his birth, his incredible miracles, and his world-changing ministry. But there's a huge 18-year gap in the story, one of the most tantalizing silences in history. The Gospels are full of action, but from the time Jesus is 12 until he's 30, the record just goes cold. After dazzling the smartest religious scholars in the temple at just 12 years old, Jesus of Nazareth completely vanishes from the biblical narrative. He doesn't show up again until he's 30, ready to kick off his public mission. So what on earth happened during those 18 lost years? Did he, as some wild legends claim, travel the world, visiting India and Egypt to study with ancient mystics? Or was he living a quiet, normal life, working with his hands as a carpenter in his dusty hometown of Nazareth? We're going to dig into the evidence for both sides of the story to figure out what most likely went down during Jesus' hidden years. Section 1. The Great Silence, setting the stage. To really get the mystery, we have to go back to where the story cuts off. The Gospel of Luke tells us that a 12-year-old Jesus went with his parents to Jerusalem for Passover. When it was time to go home, he stayed behind. After a frantic 3-day search, Mary and Joseph found him in the temple, just casually sitting among the teachers, listening and asking mind-blowing questions. Everyone who heard him was floored by his understanding. When his mom, probably equal parts relieved and furious, asked him what he was thinking, he gave that famous reply, "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" And then, radio silence. For the next 18 years, the official Gospels say absolutely nothing. This void has become a playground for speculation, a blank canvas for centuries of curiosity and fantasy. This silence is the whole problem. It's a vacuum that just begs to be filled, leading to some of the most extraordinary tales ever told about a historical figure. Did he retreat from the world to prepare, or did he go out and explore it? Let's start with the spiciest theories. Section 2. The Incredible Legends. Jesus, the World Traveler. The idea that Jesus spent his 20s on a globe-trotting spiritual quest is pretty captivating. It paints a picture of a young man searching for universal wisdom, collecting knowledge from the great mystical hotspots of the ancient world. The most famous of these legends sends Jesus to the East. This theory really took off in the late 19th century when a Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich published a book about his travels. Notovich claimed that in a monastery in the Himalayas, he was shown ancient texts that told the story of a holy man named Isa, the Arabic name for Jesus, who traveled from Judea to India as a young man. According to this story, Isa spent years studying with Brahmin priests and Buddhist monks before heading home at age 29. The narrative suggests Jesus' teachings on peace and compassion were heavily influenced by these Eastern traditions. It's a compelling idea, connecting two of the world's great spiritual giants. But there's a big problem. When historians and linguists actually looked into Notovich's claims, the story fell apart. Scholars who later visited the very same monastery found no such texts, and the head monk went on record saying Notovich had never even been there. Today, the scholarly consensus is that the life of Saint Isa was a complete fabrication, a product of 19th century fascination with the mystic East, not a real historical account. Another set of legends places Jesus not in the East, but much closer to home for some, in Britain. These tales, popular in medieval England, suggest that a young Jesus traveled with his great-uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, a supposed wealthy tin merchant. The stories say they visited Cornwall and even Glastonbury, which would later become a legendary site connected to King Arthur. While these stories are deeply embedded in English folklore and inspired the famous hymn, Jerusalem, historians agree they have no basis in fact. They're considered pious legends, created centuries later to give those places a special spiritual significance. From Persia to Egypt, wild theories have popped up over the years. But these stories of a wandering, wisdom-seeking Jesus, as romantic as they are, just don't hold up to scrutiny. So what does the actual evidence tell us? Section 3. The scholarly consensus: Jesus the carpenter of Nazareth. When you step away from the legends and look at the available evidence, a much simpler, more grounded picture comes into focus. The overwhelming view among historians and biblical scholars is that Jesus didn't travel the world. He almost certainly spent those 18 years living a pretty normal life in his hometown of Nazareth, working as a craftsman. This conclusion is built on a few key pieces of evidence. First, the Gospels themselves. Even though they're silent on the lost years, they drop crucial clues. When Jesus returns to Nazareth to teach, the shocked locals ask, "Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary?" Matthew's Gospel has them asking, "Is this not the carpenter's son?" This is the closest thing we have to a job description from that time, and it identifies him as a local tradesman, not a globe-trotting mystic. The Greek word used here is *tekton*. While often translated as carpenter, it really means a builder or artisan, someone who could work with wood, stone, or metal. Archaeology in Nazareth, led by scholars like Ken Dark, shows there was local quarrying and stonework, so Jesus and Joseph could have been general builders, not just woodworkers. This view is supported by early Christian tradition, like the writer Justin Martyr, who, in the 2nd century, mentioned that Jesus made plows and yokes. This all fits perfectly with the historical and cultural setting of 1st century Galilee. Nazareth was a small, conservative Jewish village of probably just a few hundred people. Archaeological work has revealed it was a community that strictly followed Jewish law and resisted influence from the larger Romanized cities nearby. In that kind of traditional society, a son was expected to learn his father's trade. Joseph was a tekton, and Jesus, as the son, would have learned the family business to support his family, especially if Joseph died during that time. Section 4. Weighing the evidence. Why the silence? So we have two very different stories. On one hand, epic tales of travel and secret knowledge, propped up by debunked texts and folklore. On the other, a conclusion, backed by the Gospels, tradition, and history, that Jesus lived a quiet life as a village craftsman. For historians, the choice is pretty clear. But that brings us back to the big question. If his life was so ordinary, why did the Gospel writers just skip it? The answer is all about their goal. The Gospels weren't written like a modern biography you'd pick up at the airport, detailing every stage of life. Ancient biographies, especially of religious figures, focused on the person's public life, their message, their major deeds, and their death. The evangelists wanted to document Jesus' ministry, his teachings, and the events leading to his crucifixion and resurrection. To them, those 18 years spent as a tekton in Nazareth were a time of private preparation, not public action. They weren't lost years at all. They were simply private years. They were years of studying the Hebrew scriptures, praying, and living among the very people he came to serve. This period of quiet, manual labor grounded him in the human experience, getting him ready for a radical ministry that was about to turn the world upside down. We've explored the wild legends and the historical facts, comparing the world-traveling sage with the village carpenter. But I want to know what you think happened during these lost years. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy digging into historical and biblical mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. Conclusion. While the legends of Jesus traveling to India or Britain are fascinating, they remain just that, legends. The historical evidence, though sparse, points overwhelmingly toward a much simpler and maybe more profound story. The most likely scenario is that Jesus of Nazareth spent his lost years living a life of faithful obscurity. He was a tekton, a craftsman, a son, and a member of a devout Jewish community. He learned a trade, cared for his family, and quietly prepared for his public mission. These weren't lost years. They were formative years. It was in the dust of a Nazareth workshop, not in a faraway monastery, that the builder who would reshape human history was forged. His revolutionary teachings weren't disconnected from his life. They were rooted in the reality of labor, community, and the deep faith of his people. The silence of those 18 years ends up speaking volumes. telling a story of humility and preparation before the storm.